I had a 24-year career, a $1.7 million portfolio, and a withdrawal strategy tested against every market crash I could simulate. I thought I had built an infallible system. My spreadsheets were masterpieces of paranoid precision, accounting for black swan events, sequence of return risk, and decades of inflation. My wife and I had run the numbers until they confessed, confirming we had more than enough to clock out for good on our own terms. I was certain that financial independence was a math problem I had already solved. I felt a sense of profound analytical calm as I submitted my final notice. Yet in the first 5 business days after my last paycheck, that perfectly architected system failed 3 times, not because the math was wrong, but because I had forgotten to account for the user, me. I remember that first Friday morning. The sun was coming up over the hills in Austin, just like any other day. Logically, I knew the paycheck wasn't coming. I had a 7-figure portfolio and a withdrawal plan I'd stress-tested for a decade. But around 7 a.m., my hand reached for my phone and I opened my bank app. It was pure muscle memory. And when the deposit wasn't there, my stomach dropped. It was a physical sensation, a hollow lurch that had nothing to do with needing the money. It was the feeling of a system that had run flawlessly for 2 decades, a constant and reassuring drumbeat in the background of my life that had just stopped. No amount of calculation, no spreadsheet or Monte Carlo simulation prepares you for the deafening silence of that missing deposit. For 24 years, my entire professional identity was built on preventing this exact feeling, just in a different context. As a software engineer, my job was to find and fix systemic flaws before they crashed the system. I spent my days running diagnostics, debugging legacy code, and architecting platforms that could withstand unexpected user behavior. I applied that same obsessive, methodical logic to my own finances, which is what allowed me to retire at 54, confident in the integrity of the numbers. My financial plan had accounted for a 2008-level market crash. It had accounted for runaway inflation and catastrophic medical bills. It had not, however, accounted for the psychological impact of a quiet Tuesday morning with a blank calendar and the unsettling freedom to make a mistake without a new paycheck on the way to erase it. The math of retirement is simple. The psychology of not earning is the advanced course nobody tells you about. In this video, we are going to treat my first week of retirement as a system failure and conduct a post-mortem analysis. We'll dissect the 3 costly errors I made, not to dwell on the mistakes, but to understand the hidden mechanism that produces them. Our analysis will follow 3 acts: the phantom signal, the system overrides, and finally, the patch. If you've ever suspected that your own meticulously crafted plan has a blind spot, that there's a vulnerability you can't see from this side of retirement, then you are in the right place. Make sure you're subscribed, because we are about to debug this transition together, and you won't want to miss the protocol I built to fix it. The first error was a direct result of what I now call the phantom signal. For an engineer, a system without feedback is a system in a state of failure. For 24 years, my bi-weekly paycheck was the ultimate feedback loop, performance in, deposit out. It was the system's heartbeat, confirming I was solvent, productive, and secure. When that signal stopped, my brain, like a server pinging a decommissioned API, went into a panic. It knew the API was supposed to be gone, but the underlying protocol, the deep, primal need for a signal of incoming value, kept sending requests. The mounting anxiety was the error log. In the absence of a real signal, my subconscious was desperate to generate one, and it found the quickest way to do so by turning to the only other source of financial data I had, my portfolio. This is how I found myself in my home office in Austin on the first Tuesday of my retirement. The early Texas sun was casting long shadows across my desk. I could smell my wife's coffee brewing down the hall and hear the low, steady hum of my computer, a sound that was usually a comfort, but now felt like an idling engine going nowhere. I opened my brokerage account, my hand feeling unnervingly cold on the mouse. The market had a minor, insignificant dip the day before, a tremor I wouldn't have even registered a week prior. But now, a thought gripped me that was sharp, alien, and visceral. This number is all there is now. It's the entire engine. It can't go down. It wasn't the calculated risk assessment of my spreadsheets. It was the raw, animal fear of watching the principal shrink, even by a fraction. In that moment, I violated a core principle I had held for a decade. I navigated to my holdings and located my Vanguard 500 index fund, the bedrock of my long-term growth strategy. With a few clicks, I sold a significant block of it, nearly $50,000 worth. My brain instantly supplied a tidy rationalization, locking in gains, creating a cash buffer. It was a lie. What I was really doing was manufacturing a transaction, creating a data point that felt like income. I was hitting the refresh button on a system that wasn't broken, just to feel the psychological comfort of seeing something happen. A wave of hollow relief washed over me as the trade executed, immediately followed by the cold, sickening realization that I had just let a fleeting emotion override 20 years of disciplined strategy. I had treated my life savings like an ATM because I missed my paycheck. The financial cost of that trade, after I bought back in a week later at a slightly higher price, was trivial, maybe a few $100s. The real cost was the violation of the system itself. I had just demonstrated that under the right psychological pressure, I was the single greatest point of failure in my own plan. If you've already retired, what was the first financial decision that felt completely different without a paycheck to back it up? Describe that moment in the comments. Let's debug this transition together, because recognizing the bug is the first step to patching it. And I guarantee you're not the only one who has experienced that specific system override. It's a ghost in the machine we all share. The second error was a different kind of system override, one driven not by a need for an income signal, but by a vacuum of time. The project was a bathroom remodel, something my wife and I had discussed and slotted into year 2 of our plan. It was a discretionary expense, a nice to have that our budget could accommodate eventually. Yet on Wednesday morning, staring at a calendar that was a vast, empty grid, eventually suddenly felt agonizingly far away. The urge to start the project was immense and immediate. This wasn't a spending problem. It was a time-filling problem. My work schedule hadn't just occupied 40 hours a week. It had provided a structure, a rhythm, and a clear hierarchy of tasks. Without it, my brain defaulted to the next available project, regardless of its priority in the master plan. This is the engineer's bias laid bare. You'd rather act on a flawed premise than do nothing at all. An empty schedule feels like a server with zero CPU load, an inefficient, wasted resource. The bathroom remodel became my new sprint cycle. I spent the day calling contractors and visiting showrooms, activities that felt productive and blessedly familiar. I was managing a project again. The financial consequence was a premature withdrawal of $12,000 from a brokerage account, a transaction that was neither planned for nor tax optimized for that quarter. It was a completely unforced error, a self-inflicted wound on a financial plan that was otherwise performing flawlessly. The paycheck, I was learning, wasn't just a source of funds. It was a powerful regulator of time and activity, and its absence had thrown all my other timelines into disarray. I had spent countless hours optimizing my withdrawal sequence to minimize tax drag. arguing with myself over Roth conversions versus capital gains harvesting to save a few basis points. Then, in a single afternoon, I blew past all of that meticulous architecture because I got bored on a Wednesday. It was a humbling, almost comical failure of discipline. You can plan for a market crash, but the real test is planning for a quiet Tuesday morning when the only thing moving is your own doubt. The market doesn't care about your feelings, but your feelings can have a dramatic and costly impact on how you interact with the market, especially when the old guardrails of a structured career are suddenly gone. The third error was the most insidious because it was a known bug. I had read dozens of articles and books warning new retirees against it, obsessively checking market fluctuations. This is the legacy code of the accumulator running in the decumulation phase. For 2 decades, checking my portfolio daily was a feature, not a bug. It was motivating. It provided the data I needed to confirm my savings strategy was working. A market dip was a buying opportunity, a chance to lower my cost basis. The daily check-in was a positive reinforcement loop. That script, which had served me so well for so long, became toxic the day after I retired. But knowing a piece of code is legacy is not the same as having the immunity to its effects. When you're living off the principle, that same feedback loop gets inverted. Every market dip no longer feels like an opportunity. It feels like a direct attack on your life support system. The red numbers on the screen aren't abstract percentages anymore. They represent future trips not taken, security eroded, a shortened timeline. Intellectually, I knew this. I knew that daily volatility was just noise, and that my withdrawal strategy was built to withstand it. But the emotional response, the cold knot of anxiety in my stomach, was a pre-compiled habit I couldn't simply override with logic. It's one thing to read about loss aversion in a book. It's another thing to feel it in your bones when the number on the screen is all you have. Putting it all together, the pattern became painfully clear. The impulsive trade, the premature project, the obsessive monitoring. None of these were failures of planning. My spreadsheets were still correct. My withdrawal rate was still safe. These were user interface failures. I had designed a robust back-end system, but had completely neglected the user's, my own, psychological experience in the front end. The system was generating the right outputs, but the user was misinterpreting the data and feeding it reactive, emotionally compromised inputs. I spent 24 years building systems for other people, designing them to be resilient to erratic user behavior. It took me 1 week of retirement to find the single biggest flaw in my own. My retirement plan was a perfectly architected system. It turns out I forgot to account for the user, me. The total financial cost of those first week errors was just under $1,200, factoring in the small loss from buying back my index fund position and the immediate unrecoverable costs associated with the premature bathroom project. It was a rounding error in the context of my overall portfolio, a financial paper cut. Yet the significance of that number isn't its size, but its origin. These weren't losses from a market downturn or a miscalculation in my withdrawal strategy. They were self-inflicted, born from a series of predictable psychological failures. The impulsive trade was a hunt for a signal. The project was a desperate attempt to fill a structural void. The obsessive portfolio checking was a legacy script running in a new, hostile environment. My plan had accounted for external threats, the known unknowns of the market. It had no defense against the enemy within, because I never saw myself as a variable in the equation. My system was only as strong as its most emotional, irrational user. Me. I remember sitting with my wife at our kitchen table on Saturday morning, a week after my last day. The same Austin sun that felt so full of promise a week earlier now just seemed to make the dust motes visible in the air. I had my laptop open, showing her the pristine architecture of our financial plan on a spreadsheet, pointing to the cells that proved we were fine, that the $12,000 withdrawal for the bathroom was a blip we could easily absorb. And she just looked at me, not at the screen, and said, "I don't care about the spreadsheet right now. How do you feel?" It was a simple question, but it hit me with the force of a system crash. For 24 years, my entire sense of well-being was tied to a number that went up. Now, the only number that mattered was the one I couldn't quantify, the gnawing, low-grade anxiety of being untethered. The real dashboard wasn't on the screen, it was sitting right across from me. That's when I realized the fundamental flaw in my design. I had spent 2 decades building the engine for my retirement, but I had spent 0 time building the cockpit. The plan was a masterpiece of financial engineering designed to generate a single output, a safe withdrawal rate. But retirement isn't an output, it's an interface. It requires a dashboard of new signals to replace the ones that just vanished. Signals for structure, for purpose, for progress, for security. A paycheck wasn't just money. It was a weekly confirmation that you were on track, a regulator of your time, and a buffer against rash decisions. I hadn't lost an income stream. I had lost an entire operating system. The real work of retirement, the work no spreadsheet can do for you, isn't about managing your money. It's about building a new system to manage yourself now that the old one is gone. This is why, if I could go back, I would have implemented a specific, non-negotiable first 90-day protocol. This isn't a financial strategy, it's a psychological firewall. First, a hard spending freeze on any unbudgeted item over $500, no exceptions. This isn't about saving money, it's about breaking the habit of using spending to solve a non-financial problem like boredom or anxiety. Second, a strict rule. The portfolio gets checked once a month, on the 1st, and never in response to a market alert or a news headline. This starves the legacy code of its feedback loop. And third, a mandatory weekly check-in with my wife, every Friday morning, with a single agenda item. Discuss our feelings about the transition, not the balance of our brokerage account. This isn't about vague emotional processing. It's about creating the new, essential feedback loop your old job used to provide for free. This protocol is the patch I wish I had installed before launch. It acts as a firewall against the reactive, emotional decisions that our rational minds simply can't anticipate until the system is live. Now I want to turn this back to you, specifically those of you still in the planning phase. Having seen the system failures I experienced, what is one rule you are going to pre-commit to for your own first 90 days? Share your day one directive in the comments below. Don't underestimate the power of this. Writing it down makes it real and creates a public contract with your future self. Reading through the directives from this community will also create a powerful shared playbook we can all learn from. If you're finding this post-mortem valuable for your own planning, a like on the video helps the channel, and subscribing ensures you're here for the next system diagnostic. Don't just plan your retirement, plan your transition. The first week is not the end of your career, it's the beginning of the real work.